From LA to Piscataway, you've come to the right place to talk all things Big Ten. Welcome to Big Ten Ted Live.
And welcome to what is, I guess, now becoming a rare edition of Big Ten Ted Live. Thanks, everybody, for coming in to the program here tonight, because we are talking about schedules. Not this year's schedule, not the remainder of November. I mean, we can talk about it if you really want to a little bit later on in the program, but we're talking about the 2024 schedules. Opponents were released kind of earlier in two different forms, right? You had the USC and UCLA, and then you had the Oregon and Washington opponents at two different times. And now what we're looking at is schedules. We see dates. We see the order of matchups. We see home. We see away. Now the picture is becoming a little bit more clear with everything involved. Now you can kind of see, are we going west? Are we staying in the Midwest? Are we going east? We're starting to see things kind of come into fruition. And really all we're missing right now is kickoff times and networks. And you know, networks has a lot to do with this. We're going to be talking about networks, how this kind of affects the TV, because Kerry Kenny came on Big Ten Network today, and he says a lot of these games, some of these, I shouldn't say a lot, some of these games could be flexed to a Friday night. And now without WWE Friday Night SmackDown, now in 2024, that could mean Big Ten games on Big Fox on Friday night. They've been on FS1. They've been on Big Ten Network here throughout things as well. But it's going to be very interesting to see how this all shapes up. So we're going to be talking about who has the tougher schedules, where are some of the biggest games, where are some of the biggest weekends. We're going to be talking about that. Before I really go into the farther, because we are going to do the grand reveal here of the schedule pretty soon and really start talking about scheduling stuff as well. If it's your first time coming in here, don't forget to hit subscribe. We do all sorts of content here during the season, dropping all Big Ten stuff during the season every single day, whether it's a video, whether it's a live stream, whether it's a short. Polls, the Big Ten Ted Pick'ems are very popular this time of year. Subscribing will kind of help you be notified when that stuff's happening. And by pushing the join button below, it helps you support the channel so you can see more live streams like this and really get some extra perks along the way. So thanks everybody for joining me here tonight for Big Ten Ted Live. All right, let's get into it. Let's show you the schedules, because that's what you came here to see, right? That's what you came here to see. There it was, revealed by the Big Ten Conference today, the 2024 Big Ten schedules. Now, there's a lot to break down here, and I am going to break down a lot involved in this schedule. But the first thing that I really want to talk about is the big weekends. November 2nd is one that really sticks out to me in my mind. Let's go over November 2nd right now. On November 2nd, you're going to see Ohio State at Penn State, which already for decade plus has been one of the best yearly games in the Big Ten Conference. So you got Ohio State and you got Penn State in Happy Valley. How about Oregon traveling to Ann Arbor to face off against the Michigan Wolverines as well? That's another pretty big game. These are all in the same weekend. These are all on November 2nd. Maybe one of these could get flexed to a Friday. We'll talk about that here in just a little bit. How about Wisconsin traveling to Iowa to face off to take on the Iowa Hawkeyes, the battle for the Heartland Trophy on that game on the 2nd. How about USC at Washington? Two teams that are going to need to replace some big-time quarterbacks next year. Of course, Caleb Williams for the Trojans, and of course, Michael Penix for the Washington Huskies. And then UCLA at Nebraska. I know things haven't gone very well for Dante Moore so far this season in Westwood, but maybe he'll kind of get a hold of things more in his sophomore season. Nebraska, I think, could be a pretty solid team in 2024. They're a pretty solid team here in 2023. So when I look at that schedule, Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon and Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa, USC, Washington, when I really look at that schedule, here's kind of how I break it down. Ohio State, Penn State has been a classic big noon type of game. That's the type of game that Fox really likes to put in the big noon slot. But maybe now with these USCs, these Oregons, maybe now with these different teams and these different brands, maybe things will change in terms of which games are going to be big noon kickoffs. Okay, so let's say they put Ohio State, Penn State in the big noon slot on Fox. Oregon and Michigan, USC and Washington seemed West Coast prime time. It seems like it couldn't fit into there. Could fit into the mid-afternoon on CBS. But that USC and Washington game on November 2nd, I believe is one that we really need to watch out for being on a Friday night on Big Fox. Because if you look at the rest of this, you put USC and Washington on that Friday night, you do Ohio State, Penn State in the big noon, you do Wisconsin and Iowa, which is one I think that could slide in really nicely into the mid-afternoon on CBS, and then Oregon and Michigan in primetime. That is one of those weekends. You sit on your couch, you plop your butt on your couch 11 a.m., Minnesota time, at least for me, and then you don't get up until it's 12 hours later, 11 o'clock on the other side of the clock, when it's 11 o'clock p.m. That is one of those kinds of days. And that's what the Big Ten wanted. That's what they wanted with Fox, with CBS, and NBC. That's the NFL type of schedule that they wanted. They want you to sit down and watch Big Ten football from noon to night. I've seen another idea suggested on this day as well. I've seen USC and Washington in an after dark time slot, possibly, at 10:30 Eastern time. I'm very curious to see when we have big days like this and you have a West Coast versus a West Coast team. Are we going to see these types of games be put into the after dark time slot? I don't know how the Big Ten is going to approach that. We haven't seen, I don't think, any official indication that that is going to happen, or that the Big Ten has been thinking about an after dark type of deal. I don't think we've gone there quite yet, but maybe we will at some point. Maybe we will do an after dark type of thing, because the Big Ten has 4 schools that in theory are going to stay up for the after dark type of game. So, like I live in Minnesota, for example. Okay, that's Central Time Zone. Nebraska, Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, the Illinois schools, etc., all Central Time Zones. That's a 9:30 p.m. kickoff. Now, if you've been sitting and watching football all day since big noon, right? Sometimes the biggest game of the day, right? That's how the Big Ten Fox has done it, over the years. Maybe, just maybe, by that time, are you going to be a little bit tired? Who knows? Who knows? I'm just very curious to see how that is approached going forward. I think there's a potential for it. I just don't know if it's a huge game, a West Coast school versus a West Coast school. I don't know if it's number 10 versus number 15 or something like that. I don't think they're going to put it in an after dark time slot. That's just how I feel about the after dark deal. It's tough for me, right? Because I'm not used to it, right? Being in the Central Time Zone. There's days, I think a couple of weeks back, it was the week where Wisconsin played Iowa. There was no primetime game because I think that was USC Notre Dame that week. So there's been, going back a decade or so, there's been days where, the Big Ten hasn't played night games in November. That's a big thing in terms of the scheduling as well. So that from a Big Ten fans' point of view, when I've been watching games, in the past, in November, we haven't played night games. So there are some kind of new things, and I've covered that in past videos and live streams going back to last year with the debacle with Kevin Warren and the like. But I am so excited right now for November 2nd. That is a weekend that really sticks out to me as well. Let's talk about October 12th. This is something very interesting that I want to bring up when it comes to October 12th. And I am going to get to your comments here as we kind of go through this. If you want to chime in on the show, call in numbers on the screen as well. October 12th, let's talk about that one. Ohio State travels to Oregon. Great game, right? This is, remember, 2019, the year before COVID, Oregon came into Columbus and beat the Buckeyes in the Ducks versus Bucks matchup. I think they were supposed to play in 2020 at Autzen Stadium. And of course, 2020, right? All over the place. And now looks like Oregon is going to get that home game here on October 12th. How about Penn State at USC that week as well? And then you've got Washington going to Kinnick to take on Iowa, which I think is a very interesting kind of funner matchup over there. So let's talk about this one. The first thing that really stuck out to me, and kind of follow along there on the graph on the screen, the graphic on the screen, October 12th, which game is big noon? Which game is big noon? You got Ohio State traveling to Oregon. You got Penn State traveling to USC. Both West Coast games. You got Washington taking on Iowa, of course. But those first two are pretty darn good matchups. With the Bucks versus Ducks, Ohio State and Oregon. It looks like it was 2021. My apologies over there. Ohio State at Oregon. How about Penn State at USC? Both of those games are on the West Coast. Now, I know we saw USC in Colorado play a 9 a.m. or is it 10 a.m. maybe up in the mountains in Colorado, local kickoff. These are both 9 a.m. local kickoffs. Are we going to see a 9 a.m. local kickoff on Big Noon? This could be a great weekend for the new TV partners, for CBS and for NBC as well. Ohio State at Oregon, Penn State at USC. You could kind of see those West Coast games. Maybe one of them goes to a Friday night, and a Friday night on Big Fox type of deal as well. Washington at Iowa. Right now, if I'm scheduling this, Washington at Iowa could be Big Noon, and then you slide in those other two on a CBS and an NBC time slot as well. All right, let's move on to some more stuff here. Let's talk. I'm just going through some bullet points that I kind of put together. Let's talk about Penn State in 2024. The Nittany Lions have an interesting early/mid stretch in their 2024 schedule. Let's talk about it. Because this is a Penn State team. I've been saying this going back to the offseason. The Nittany Lions are the team of 2024. Right, Drew Aller will be a true junior. Singleton and Allen will be true juniors. Abdul Carter, the linebacker on defense, is going to be a true junior as well. So they'll have that much more experience. They need some. We know it. We know it. We've seen it. I know you guys have seen it. They need some help at wide receiver. They need some help on the outside. Okay, so we'll cross that bridge when we come to it with Penn State. But let's look at this stretch right here. Penn State opens up conference play at home against Illinois. After that, October 5th, home against UCLA. October 12th at USC, so they get the LA schools back-to-back. And then October 26th at Wisconsin. November 2nd versus Ohio State. November 9th versus Washington. So you got USC and Wisconsin both on the road. You got Ohio State and then Washington at home. That is not an easy stretch for the Penn State Nittany Lions. Now, I know they're going to be a really good football team in 2024, but it's still no easy stretch right now. But you look at that, okay, and I know here's the thing about this whole deal, okay, and I'm putting into my head, well, Aller's going to have one more year, all these guys are going to be coming back. But you got to put in your head, a lot of these teams are going to look a lot different in 2024. And it's not just a 2024 thing. It's a college football in the 2020s thing. Transfer portal, all of these things, right? We heard a rumor about Michael Pratt today, the Tulane quarterback. He kind of struck it down right away. Going to be very interesting to see how that all plays out. But there's going to be schools, I've mentioned this before, Oregon, Washington, USC. Those three schools coming to the league are going to be, we'll see what happens in USC, see if Lincoln Riley kind of sticks around as well. But those are going to be just great places for quarterbacks to end up. And look what Bo Nix has done, resurrecting his career, going from Auburn to be one of the college football's best quarterbacks at Oregon. Michael Penix is a Heisman contender right now. Now, he was good at Indiana, but he really raised his team from great to elite to really being in that upper echelon of quarterbacks right now. So we see that right now, but we'll see what happens with the Penn State Nittany Lions. They got a lot to figure out. if they want to be that team to take that next step, they got a lot to figure out. But when you take a look at the Nittany Lions schedule, no Michigan on the schedule right now. They avoid Oregon as well in 2024. So can they take that next step? Can they be that team? We'll see. We'll see. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But when they really open up the schedule, it's not going to be easy for the Penn State Lions. So if they want to be that team, they're going to have a chance to prove it in early to mid-October as well. Here's something too, and I heard this on the Big Ten Network Reveal show today. How about Minnesota and Iowa? Both will play their first Big Ten games against each other. This is one of the best rivalries maybe in the Big Ten Conference right now. Definitely the best trophy in all the great trophy games in the Big Ten. The Floyd of Rosedale, awesome. We just saw that game take place down in Iowa City. But they will be each other's first games. The Floyd of Rosedale is on the line September 21st over there in Minneapolis. And according to Dave Rebson on the Big Ten Network Reveal show, this is the earliest that this game has ever been played. The earliest that this game has ever been played, which is crazy to me. It's not. It's just crazy that they put it that early on the schedule. But here's the thing about these schedules, folks. Okay, if you saw the Big 12 schedule release, boy. Speaking of Penn State, all right, Penn State has called themselves unrivaled. The Big 12 Conference is taking what Penn State has kind of had as their marketing and mantra and said, you know what, as a conference, we're going to be unrivaled. There were, 3 maybe protected rivalries in that Big 12 conference schedule reveal? Brett Yormark just saying, you're all going to be rivals with each other. A lot of newness over there in that league, but I digress. On that. I don't think I've mentioned this quite yet. I really like what the Big Ten had, protecting the games that needed to be protected. And then, a lot of these schools able to go out and capitalize going out west to good recruiting markets like California and the like out there. So I think out of all of these schedule reveals that we've seen, especially as of late, ACC and the Big 12, I think the Big Ten, hey, maybe I'm a little bit biased. That look down at the name of the channel, right? I might be a little bit biased, but I think we've done it pretty good. Let's talk about Nebraska for a little bit in terms of the schedule. If Nebraska can finish strong and they build off of 2023, because this is a team right now that I know they have the injury bug has bitten them huge this season, but they find a way to persevere kind of through it all here through this season. But if Nebraska can finish strong, who knows? Maybe they win the West. We don't know who's going to win the West. I don't know who's going to win the West. You don't know who's going to win the West. That's how crazy it kind of is right now. But there's a world where Nebraska, there is a world. I'm not saying it's this universe that I'm currently residing in right now, but there's a world out there where Nebraska can start 7-0 in 2024. Out of conference. UTEP, Colorado's at home, and then they play Northern Iowa. That's it. Northern Iowa is the FCS. But once you get into Big Ten play, let's talk about the Big Ten play for just a minute. Home against Illinois, at Purdue, versus Rutgers, at Indiana. Not exactly a murderer's row to start off the 2024 conference schedule for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Now, I think there will be some teams in there that will be improved. Luke Altmaier is going to be back. I think Hudson Card is going to be back. Gavin Wimsatt is going to be back. So all those teams should have returning quarterbacks, and maybe they can kind of build off of some things. But the way Nebraska is playing on defense right now, and if they stay healthy in the first half of that season, there's a possibility that the Huskers could start 7-0. Here it comes. But look at what happens after that for Nebraska. At Ohio State, home against UCLA, at USC, home against Wisconsin, and at Iowa. There's another world out there where Nebraska starts 7-0 and they finish 7-5. Not saying that will happen. Not saying they'll start 7-0. Not saying they'll finish 7-5. look, there's a long way to go before we get to 2024, but it could happen right now for the Nebraska Cornhuskers over there to see maybe they can improve their team enough where who knows what can happen. 2024 is such an unpredictable year. Really looking forward to that one. Let's talk about the Trojans from Southern California. They're going to be fighting on here in the Big Ten Conference. Boy, do they have a schedule and a half. Schedule in 3 quarters, 2 schedules in 1, however you want to categorize it. USC has it in the year 2024. I think they play LSU in Vegas. Let me know in the chat if I got that right or if that's someone else I'm thinking of. LSU in Las Vegas at Allegiant Stadium, I think, in the non-conference. I think Michigan has Texas in a non-conference game in this season as well. So it's going to heat up, people. It's going to heat up. Let's talk about USC, though. Their first Big Ten game ever. It's going to be in Ann Arbor, Michigan, taking on the Michigan Wolverines. Boy, we're sitting here now on November 2nd, 2023. I have no idea what Michigan and USC are going to be like. Okay, there's a story that dropped before I came on the air about Big Ten athletic directors meeting with Tony Petitti right now about wanting to take action and all of that. So who knows what's going to happen with Michigan through the remainder of the season, into the postseason, all that. And then who knows what the reaction to that is inside the building at Chamberlain Hall in Ann Arbor, Michigan. USC, Lincoln Riley, it's been floated out there, maybe an NFL. He doesn't seem to be a guy, for me at least, where he's in college forever. Lincoln Riley, to me, not saying he'll be a great NFL coach and not saying that NFL teams should definitely back up the Brinks truck for Lincoln Riley, because I think there's better head coaches to take over NFL teams than Lincoln Riley. But USC and Michigan could have very different looking teams, very different looking situations when they meet up in that first Big Ten Conference game for the USC Trojans. But that one is at Michigan. That one is in Ann Arbor. That one's got Big Noon written all over it. It's got Fox written all over it throughout that game. But at Michigan to start, home against Wisconsin, at Minnesota, home against Penn State. Okay, you got two of the 3 B1G3 this season when you go to Michigan and you play Penn State as well. Wisconsin, we'll see what they look like. Minnesota, we'll see what they look like. Minnesota's kind of one of those teams that we thought should improve, at least in 2024, right? Darius Taylor, if they can keep him around. Zach Evans, if they can keep him around. Ethan Kaliak-Manis, if he can improve, and if they can progress a little bit more, maybe Minnesota will be a little bit better. So it's not the easiest start to the schedule for USC, but here's the positive for USC. Maybe the Big Ten doing one of their biggest brands on the West Coast is solid. USC does not have to travel really into unfamiliar territory. We'll kind of put it that way after the middle of October. Because if you look at USC's schedule towards the right of your screen, after the middle of October, they got a home game against Rutgers. They go to Seattle to play Washington. They host Nebraska and at UCLA, and then they end the season hosting Notre Dame. So USC's a little comfy, sitting in a nice comfy chair there at the end of the season, at least through this thing. I think it's going to be hard as these schedules to go along for maybe some of these SoCal West Coast schools to have a comfy schedule like that as we continue to go along. Yeah, but look at UCLA. UCLA maybe not as comfortable right now because UCLA has got to go to Nebraska in early November. It's early November right now. There's snow on the ground here in Minnesota. Right? I know it's more north than Nebraska, so the weather's maybe a little bit different. But hey, we got snow. 30 degrees here. It's temperature right around the mid-30s. Got into the 40s today. But yeah, so we'll see where UCLA is in terms of the weather for that one as well. And here's one thing that stuck out to me and stuck out in my mind. Oregon and Washington, this year, they met in the middle of the season a few weeks back. And they had what some folks called a double hate week. Okay, where they had a bye, both teams had a bye before they played each other. Look at the graphic here. Oregon's got a blue square, and so does Washington. And they play in the final game of the season Another double hate week. As far as I'm concerned, I'm not sure. I don't think there's non-conference games slid in there. As far as I know, that is a double hate week for the Ducks and the Huskies. And that's very unique because you kind of look around at the schedule. I don't think that there's a ton of that. Right, there's not a ton of both teams getting a bye and then playing each other the very next week. But they did it here with Oregon and Washington, getting byes the second to last week of the season and then playing each other. Oregon and Washington there. What a classic matchup that was earlier this season. It's going to be, I think it's going to be more of that. I can't wait to see that Oregon-Washington matchup. The double hate week. The double hate week. Can you imagine that kind of happening? I would kind of like to see that maybe happen with some of our other Big Ten teams. Can you imagine 2 weeks of build-up for Ohio State and Michigan? Can you imagine 2 weeks of build-up for maybe a rivalry like Iowa and Nebraska, Wisconsin and Minnesota, something like that? I was kind of observing the Ducks and the Huskies fans, and it almost seemed to me, because, I wasn't as in tune with the Pac-12 schedule and where that game was landing. During the bye week, I was almost like, wait, are they playing this week? Right? Because they're really starting to heat it up. The trash talk's really starting to heat up on Twitter and social media and the like. So that's kind of cool to see, kind of late in the season, that double hate week as well. I want to give an example because there's been some teams in the Big Ten East, the Marylands, the Rutgers, the Indianas, you could maybe throw in the Michigan States of the world that aren't the B1G3. When you look at those teams right now, they say, oh, we don't have to play Ohio State. We don't have to play Michigan. We don't have to play Penn State. At least we don't have to play all of them in the same year again. But let's look at Maryland in this schedule. Maryland loses Michigan and Ohio State. Terps fans, all right, let's go. Let's rack up some wins. We're good. They lose Michigan and Ohio State, but they gain USC and Oregon. I'm not saying those two are equal, okay? Because if you look at it from this year's standpoint, USC certainly has taken a drop from where a lot of people really expected them to be, okay? And Oregon's been great, right? Oregon has been an outstanding team. This is a team that can definitely win the final year of the Pac-12. This is a team that can certainly make the college football playoff as well. But if you get peak, or at least close to peak, USC and Oregon, Michigan and Ohio State, that's not much of a drop-off. It's not a ton. That's not a big drop-off between the Wolverines and Buckeyes to the Trojans and the Ducks. So some of these other teams, they might sacrifice an Ohio State and a Michigan, something like that, but you also might gain something like this, like a USC and an Oregon as well. Last point I'm going to finish up before I get to some comments here. Illinois and Iowa are the only two schools in 2024 that start the Big Ten slate with 2 road games. So an at to kind of start the season. Illinois, September 21st at Nebraska, September 28th at Penn State. For Iowa, the Floyd-Rosedale game at Minnesota to start things off, and at Ohio State for the Iowa Hawkeyes out there. So just keep that in mind. And you kind of see some teams like Michigan starts things off with 2 home games, USC, and then the Little Brown Jug game there against the Minnesota Golden Gophers, Illinois and UCLA for Penn State. So I'm going to get to some comments here as we kind of progress through the program here tonight. Our guy Tony is in the house here tonight. Tony says Gophers' first 4 games are a brutal stretch. Let's take a look at Minnesota. Yeah, it's not great. Iowa, Michigan, USC, and UCLA. We know that Iowa game is tough. It's in Minneapolis. We'll see if they can win it in back-to-back seasons. Got to go to Michigan for that Little Brown Jug game. USC, that's a tough first 3-game stretch. Now it kind of lightens up a little bit. I'm not sure which way I'm going on UCLA quite yet, but Maryland, Illinois, Rutgers, that kind of thing. So Minnesota, maybe if you're kind of shooting in the dark right now, maybe close to a 500 type of season. If they fall to Michigan, they fall to USC, they fall to Penn State, that's 3. Maybe they can beat Wisconsin, Rutgers, Illinois, Maryland. Who knows which way UCLA and Iowa go. So we'll see what happens for Minnesota. Not sure what their out of conference schedule is over there as well. But everybody's schedule is hard. We talk about who has the toughest schedule draws. I don't think that's much of a thing anymore. It's not going to be a thing really in the SEC now with Texas and OU. It's not going to be a thing here in the Big Ten. I don't think it's even going to be a thing in the Big 12. Really, because everybody in the Big 12 is so close competitively Now, you don't have an outstanding program necessarily in the Big 12, right? Utah is maybe one of your better programs out there, but I think all of those, that's going to be the any given Saturday conference where you could see upsets and crazy things kind of going along. Our guy, Big Ten TED Champions Club member Jared Jones is here as well tonight. Resident Hawkeye fan Erica Goldberg is here as well. Our guy, Doug Scott from the QB11 show has joined the chat here tonight as well. All right, let's get into some things here. Let's see what we got here. The Moen Show, our guy Moen joining us here tonight. If you haven't checked out his show, I believe he goes live on Mondays, if I'm not mistaken. So check that out if you haven't already. Washington and Iowa at noon. Okay, we'll agree on that. Ohio State and Oregon at 3:30. That's a really good CBS game. That's a great CBS game. And then USC Penn State under the lights. This is what the Big Ten imagined. When they signed Fox, CBS, and NBC, this right here. I got the comment on the screen. You can look at it if you go horizontally across the schedule. This is what they wanted. This is what they envisioned. Now, you're not going to get this every single week of the year. But if you get it 2 times, 3 times a year where you've got big matchup after big matchup, and I think some weeks are going to surprise us. I really think that. I really think that. I think it will surprise us. Moen also chiming in. Yeah, James Franklin's still going to be the coach. Still call a run on 4th and 5. I will say in that Buckeyes-Nittany Lions game, there were some of this going on in some of that game from a play calling standpoint on the Penn State side. So. Yeah, so who knows? Maybe they won't be the team of 2024 when all is said and done. But talent-wise, it seems like it seemed like it should stack up pretty well for them. But that remains to be seen. Our guy Jared Jones chiming in once again. I feel like there's going to be some good games pushed to BTN, FS1, and Peacock. That's another interesting thing is the streaming part of this. There's some folks out there that, how do I put this? Aren't the biggest fans of Big Ten games on Peacock. But I think now with just 4 more teams, which essentially equals, give or take, 2 more games a week after you kind of go through a lot of your buys, you could see some more games on Peacock. But I agree with Jared here. You know, because of the depth of the conference and because you're adding 4 great to solid football teams, I think you're going to see a lot of good. And this is good for BTN. This is good for FS1. This is good for them. There's a little bit of a trickle-down effect, right? When maybe you have a big game on Fox and then your 4th game of the week, say an FS1 game, is still pretty darn good. I still think that's going to be. Like if you get an FS1, I'd have to go through the schedule and try to find an example of this. But if you get an Iowa against an Illinois, and both of those teams are pretty solid, you know, that's a pretty darn good game on FS1 as well. Not a lot of James Franklin fans in the chat tonight. I can definitely I can definitely see that. And that's all right. That's all right with me. All right, Puff EJ coming in here tonight. Love that pig. Minnesota fans are loving it right now. I think in terms of trophy games, Tony is going with Paul Bunyan's axe. I grew up on that as a Wisconsin fan, as a Badger fan, as a Wisconsin resident. Now I'm living in Minnesota. The axe kind of definitely holds a special place in my heart. There's no question about that. Jared also chiming in. Glad Iowa and Nebraska remain a Black Friday. I think a lot of people put a lot of emphasis into the Brett McMurphy tweet earlier in the day. I think he was just lining up specific weeks. Maybe he should have done week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, week 5, etc. Instead of, because a lot of people said, whoa, Iowa, Nebraska's going to Saturday. There's going to be some games here. As I said, Kerry Kenny came on BTN and he says some of these games are going to get moved to Fridays. Right. And I think it's especially when you get later on in the year when teams have, when their bye week has kind of surpassed. I think you're going to see, and there's a double bye in a lot of these schedules. So once you have more games on the conference schedule, I think you're going to see some move to Friday. I'm not the biggest fan of it. All right, this is me. I'm not the biggest fan of it because I'm working on Friday nights. But if I'm not working on Friday night, then it's great. So that's just kind of how all that goes down. Here's Tony coming in. USC plays LSU and Notre Dame in non-conference play. Wow. That is, and then you factor in USC playing Michigan, playing Penn State, in conference as well, and then some of those other teams. If USC doesn't really improve this offseason, especially on defense, could USC go 6-6? Could they go 7-5? That doesn't seem. I mean, year one in the Big Ten, could it happen? Sure, it could happen, but I don't know. That's a tough schedule, folks. That is tough. Billy Tuesday, I see your profile picture, and then I see your comment. I'm like, well, that makes sense. Michigan schedules next year is this kind of punishment. Maybe they're looking ahead. We can talk about Michigan a little bit later in the show if you want to, because I know that's a hot topic right now as well. Tony also chiming in. Michigan State schedule. Let's look at the Spartans. They start off with Maryland. They got to play Ohio. Well, Michigan State, they got to play Ohio State. They got to play Oregon, and they got to play Michigan. So those are three pretty big powers in that schedule for the Michigan State Spartans. You look outside of that, you get Maryland, you get Iowa, you get Indiana, you get Illinois, you get Purdue, and you get Rutgers. So Michigan State's objective, I see where you're coming from this, Tony. Michigan State's objective, I think, right now is going to be, all right, we got 3 really tough games, but let's get a coach in here that can take advantage of the transfer portal and really bolster up our team. Because there's coaches that have certainly done that. And you're going to see, people have seen what Deion Sanders has done, even locally here in the Big Ten. Luke Fickell brought in a lot of transfer. It seems like all of them gotten injured. But Matt Rule has brought in some transfers. Okay, so there's coaches that have said, we want to recruit, we want to be a developmental program that even come in their first year and utilize the transfer portal a great deal. So that's going to be interesting to see what Michigan State does. If you wanted to, I know Urban Meyer's been floated out there. I've seen some things recently about Urban. I think he could be successful at Michigan. I just don't see it. Things don't seem to connect for me. I don't know. Urban Meyer coaching the state of Michigan seems a little sacrilegious to me, even though I know it's not the Wolverines, but I don't know. Things just don't seem to connect in my brain. But who knows? Who knows? That could happen. Jared is our resident Buckeye fan talking about their schedule. If you look at Ohio State's from top to bottom, they got to play Oregon, they got to play Penn State, and they got to play Michigan. Those are tough games. Outside of that, Michigan State, Iowa, Nebraska. Here's the thing about schedules. If you're an Ohio State, if you're a Michigan, if you're in a Penn State, you're a USC, you're a Oregon, you're a really good team, the schedule is probably going to be pretty favorable because you're pretty damn good. So I think that goes. If you're I'm not going to say Northwestern. I'm not going to say if you're a Northwestern because I am all in on the Cats. Okay, I try to remain pretty unbiased on this show, but that story, what Northwestern's doing right now, you can't help but cheer for the Cats right now. That's just what David Braun is doing. It's been one, the most overlooked story maybe in college football, and 2, the best story in college football at the same time. I know that sounds a little bit confusing, but that's just how I see it. That's just how I see it. All right, let's see what else we got going on here. Yep, Tony chiming in here about the guy in BTN. That was Kerry Kenny that announced that here a little bit later on today. A little bit earlier here in the day. Casey Mallory, resident Hawkeye, another resident Hawkeye fan. I agree. I don't like Friday games because high school football is on Friday night. I got high school playoff football tomorrow night. And then if they win, I got to do it next Thursday night. I know that's not a Friday, but it's going to happen whether I like it. Okay, I'm not in the office. I don't work in Chicago. It's going to happen whether you like it or not. That's just the fact of the matter. There's too many games right now for this to not happen. Okay, and now that Big Fox has a window open on Friday nights, I think you could possibly see some more of this as well. Oh, Jared, if it was only that simple. If it was only that simple. Take that day off of work. I think I took 2 Fridays off of work for high school football this year. I think it was 2 Fridays. Yeah, because the day Illinois played Kansas, I was kind of watching that here and doing that. So TV doesn't stop. Community TV doesn't stop, and sometimes you got to do what you do. But yeah, I'll try to get as many Fridays off as possible. The good thing is maybe the best that Friday game is going to be is probably the fourth best game of the weekend. But we've already talked about on some of these weekends, sometimes the fourth best game of the weekend it's going to be a pretty darn good game. It's going to be a pretty darn good game as well. Erica, call in sick. Yeah. I can only really do that once a year. If I do that on 3 Fridays, it'll be, what's going on over there? What kind of bug is going on there around where Ted visits on Fridays? What's he doing on Thursdays? So he gets called in sick every Friday as well. Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. Casey chiming in. Yeah. So when we talk about high school football, I will say this, and high school football, I will say what we have here in Minnesota, and then my experience in Wisconsin as well, because I've covered high school football in 3 states, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and North Dakota. Schedules are all fairly similar. Wisconsin right now starts 1 week earlier than Minnesota. But essentially it's like the last Friday in August. The regular season just ended 2 weeks ago, so now we're going through playoffs and all that. And I think, what do we got? 3 more weeks of this season. So yeah, so when you talk about the end of the regular season, that's middle of October. They'll definitely be done here in Minnesota by the second last game of the year, third last game of the year. But when you talk about high school football, it's not just me, right? It's not just me that's going out there and complaining about this. I've heard Tom Allen in their press conference kind of bring this up, because you got to think some of these Friday nights, coaches are doing local recruiting trips. If you have a game at home, all right, if Matt Rule has I'm just going to point one out here on the schedule. If Matt Rule on November 2nd, they're hosting UCLA, and he wants to do a recruiting trip, see if we can find some more kids out of Bellevue West in Omaha, guys like Daniel Kalin and Hall, the receiver that's coming in. If I want to do a local recruiting trip and scouting, whatever, if I want to check some of these kids out locally, that's where I'm going. That's where I'm going on a Friday night after practice. So I don't know if coaches are the biggest fan of it either. Of course, it shortens the week just a little bit as well. So, that's just kind of where coaches may sit with it right now. And of course, I'm got a completely different story as well over there. But here's the thing about 2024, guys, it's a hodgepodge. Like there's so much we don't know about this year, and there's so much I'm excited to know about this year. I mentioned Oregon, USC, and Washington are going to be destinations for transfer portal quarterbacks, I believe. We don't know what's going to happen with Michigan. We don't know what's going to happen with Michigan tomorrow, more or less 2024. I've said before that I'd be shocked if Jim Harbaugh returns. We've heard some stuff about contract extensions in there as well. So we just don't know. We just don't know what's going to happen with 2024. But I think that's what makes this very exciting when we're talking about this. That's what makes this even more fun right now, is we can look ahead at kind of the unpredictable. Who's going to be that surprise team? Who's going to be that team that really comes out of the woodwork and really makes a difference? And really, and this is a 12-team playoff year, folks. So I know we're focused on the top 2 teams that make the Big Ten championship. But I think another thing we have to be focused on, who's team number 3? Who's team number 4? Who's maybe team number 5 that can maybe get into the college football playoff? We're assuming right now that it's going to be a 5+7 college football format, with the Pac-12 being what it is. I have no idea what's happening with the legal stuff with with Oregon State and Washington State. That's going to happen. Whatever's going to happen over there, I'm not paying too much attention to it right now. But it looks like it's going to be 5+7. All right, so that's the schedule. Wanted to bring that up. That's kind of the main thing on the docket here tonight. But let's kind of go to some other topics. We can maybe come back to schedule a little bit later on as well. All right, let's transition. I got a question here coming in from Erica, which I will get to as it pertains to the Iowa Hawkeyes. And I have some thoughts on it. I have got some thoughts on it. So let's dive into it here. All right. Offensive coordinator, Brian Ferentz. He's going bye-bye. Brian Ferentz will not, of course, not be in Iowa City in 2024. Eric asked, we have no idea who the offensive coordinator will be next year for the Iowa Hawkeyes. What are your thoughts on that? Who are some good candidates in your opinion? I saw a tweet about this the other day. And sometimes you're scrolling through and I'm like, oop, that makes sense. Oop, that makes sense. I saw a picture of former Wisconsin coach Paul Chryst. And it kind of made me think a little bit. From what I heard is Paul Chryst is fairly friendly and on fairly good terms with Kirk Ferentz. Paul Chryst, I think, and Kirk could get along in terms of their offensive culture, in terms of their offensive philosophy. Boy, and when you think of two coaches that are similar, Kirk and Paul Chryst are a little bit similar. So you look at Paul Chryst, I think you got to throw out there as well. I think he's an analyst right now with Texas. Beyond that, I think you've got some thinking to do, because here's what the more information that I will provide as it pertains to Iowa right now. You got to work within the box that Kirk Ferentz is providing you. Because the comments today, earlier in the week from Kirk Ferentz, and then the comments today from athletic director Beth Getz suggest that Kirk Ferentz is going to be around. And he's going to be around for a little bit. So you've got to work within what Kirk wants you to do. And I could see Paul Chryst coming in. These are two guys that respect each other. These are two guys that, as far as we know, get along. As far as we know, share a similar offensive philosophy. And I think that's the big thing. When you talk about offensive coordinators now at Iowa, I think that's the really big thing that we got to talk about. We got to talk about, because you are under Kirk's umbrella. So you can't bring in a guy. I know people were joking when they said Scott Frost, but we can just use maybe not necessarily him, but someone like him as an example. Someone that maybe likes to spread it out and throw it around like he did at Oregon, like what he tried to do at Nebraska. Where that doesn't really mesh with the personnel at Iowa. It doesn't mesh with what Iowa has been historically. That doesn't go together with the Iowa Hawkeyes. I think what Paul Chryst has been historically meshes well with the Iowa Hawkeyes. Now, this is an Iowa team that can still be successful in this Big Ten. They still have the best defensive coordinator maybe in all of college football. I think you got to find somebody that meshes well with Kirk Ferentz. I believe that's going to be the biggest thing that needs to happen. Of course, you need to improve personnel. Of course you do. Cade McNamara, of course, is going to be back. He's already said that. I think the running game is pretty solid. Like, we've seen solid things out of Caleb Johnson. Jazz Patterson, I know, is a young running back that I've raved about on this channel before. So there's some good talent. I think the problem with Iowa, one of the problems with Iowa, offensive line, Brian Ferentz was a really good offensive line coach. And I think maybe when he got promoted to offensive coordinator, maybe his focus deterred a little bit from the offensive line, and then maybe it went where it went. And maybe that's kind of one reason why Iowa is where they're at right now. One of the many reasons. I know there's a lot of reasons why maybe they are where they are here right now. But Paul Chryst is one. When I saw that, I'm like, okay, that makes sense. I could see that. It fits into Iowa's culture. It fits into what they want to do. And as we're kind of talking about Iowa, I did say early in the week that Kirk Ferentz should maybe have his swan song, right? And maybe this should be one swift move. No Gary Barta, no Brian Ferentz, no Kirk Ferentz. Doesn't look like that's going to happen. And Beth Getz put out a statement today that said, yeah, we support Kirk. Kirk's a Hall of Fame coach, and he is. Kirk's a great coach. And I'm very curious to see how this is all going to play out with Kirk at the helm now, looking for a new offensive coordinator. And it appears, at least for the long term, that he's going to have to deal with working with Betts in the athletic office over there. Thank you, Erica, for the $5 donation. The $5 super chat really helps the channel out as well. Kirk needs to hire an OC and let them come in and run their offense. I understand that. Paul as an OC isn't different enough. They'll save his rep for which has been tarnished. Okay, let's tackle this one for just a little bit. There's a difference between, how do I say this? What should happen and what will happen. I think there's a difference there. Okay? So, yes, in theory, Kirk Ferentz should take on a role that is maybe oversees a lot of the things, both on offense and defense. But I don't know if that's reality right now. I don't know if that's in reality. But here's the thing I will say about Paul Chryst is that maybe I could see maybe Kirk trusting him enough, having a good enough relationship for him to come in and say, yep, go with the offense, let her fly. Let her fly. Or that could not happen. So, yeah, I would love to see Iowa's offense take a dramatic philosophy change. But I don't know if that's going to happen as long as Kirk is the head coach here. I think he's going to look at this Iowa situation and he's going to look, this has worked for this many years, like you heard it in his press conference earlier this week. That says, we've had a process of doing things for 25 years. After the season ends, we evaluate and then we make changes. He was kind of talking about that in reference to the move that Beth Getz made in terms to his son, Brian Ferentz, and the offensive coordinator position. But I don't know. It's going to be very interesting to see how this all develops at Iowa. I've already in my brain got some off-season topics that I know it's November. Did we not just start this season? Was it not just 70 degrees outside and we were talking about conference realignment? Now we're talking about the end of the season. But in all reality, I've got some things in the head for the offseason. Iowa is towards the top of the list. Because I'm very intrigued to see how they're all going to fit this in. Because I think they know where they have to improve. Will they? It all starts with that offensive coordinator hire. It all starts with that. So we'll see exactly what happens with that. Jared stating the obvious. Beth Getz is a stud. Yeah, she's a great athletic director. I think what she's done already since taking over for Gary, I think she's done the first thing, maybe not the first thing, one of the first things that happened when she came in as AD is one of the big things that Gary Barta did not do, and that's establish a relationship with the Swarm Collective. I think she understands how this current age of college athletics works and how big NIL is. Okay, because if you don't have a relationship with your school's NIL collective, you need to create one. You need to find one. That's kind of where we're at right now. So credit to Beth. That was one of the first moves that she was made when she came in as the interim director of athletics at Iowa. Of course, making the move with Brian Ferentz is another big move. And now based on what I'm hearing both from Kirk and Beth, it does not appear right now that this is going to be a situation where Kirk rides off into the sunset. It just doesn't look that way. Definitely something to keep an eye on. But yeah, it's a very good discussion here. Billy Tuesday talking with Erica here in the chat. Quarterback prospects, because you got, excuse me if I don't pronounce this correctly, but Marco Lainez was kind of a quarterback that came in this class. He's a freshman. Kirk said at his press conference this week, there's a clear 1, 2, and 3 with this. What would that be? Deacon Hill and then Joey Labus, and then Marco, I believe. Of course, you don't have Cade, who was number 1, so Marco would have been the 4 entering the season. But he said there was a clear 1, a clear 2, and a clear 3. What does that tell you about the current quarterback situation at Iowa? I don't know. I'm going to finish on Iowa with this, and then we'll kind of pivot to something else here. When I look at the Hawkeyes for the rest of the season, when I look at Iowa for the remainder of this deal, I don't know. I'm reluctant because if you can't score points, I understand. There's so much pressure on this Iowa defense right now. There is so much pressure being put on the Hawkeyes. Okay? On the defensive side of the football. All right? So, if you can't score points, it's going to be extremely difficult. And when I look at the remaining schedule for the Iowa Hawkeyes, of course it starts this Saturday. It starts this Saturday when the Iowa Hawkeyes visit the Northwestern Wildcats. If you follow my pick'ems on the channel, I've been pretty safe for the whole year. I haven't really gone on any big limbs. I didn't really go on any big limbs, I don't think, to start the season as well. But I went on a limb this week. And I picked Northwestern to win the game at Wrigley Field against the Iowa Hawkeyes. Score 17-13. Still taking the under. Because Iowa, it's tough. It's really hard right now. Like, let's compare. If you compare Minnesota to Northwestern in terms of offenses, I don't know if there's a huge difference. Like, look at that Minnesota-Northwestern game, for example. I don't know if there's a huge difference right now between the Gophers and the Wildcats. And then look what happened in that Minnesota-Northwestern game earlier this season. Right? So, I think it's part of me loving the way the Cats are playing right now, and a combination of just where Iowa is. Now Brian Ferentz is not going to be back. I'm very curious to see how that affects things. There's some noise going on around the program. Northwestern right now, they can see bowl eligibility. They can see the postseason game. They have that within their sights right now. And I look at Northwestern's schedule right now, and I can see it. But looking at the Iowa Hawkeyes' remaining games, Northwestern at Wrigley Field. Rutgers comes to Kinnick. Rutgers is a good defense as well. That could be another type of physical, low-scoring defensive battle. Illinois and Iowa. Illinois has been the roller coaster of the Big Ten so far this season, then at Nebraska to finish the year. So nothing's guaranteed right now for the Iowa Hawkeyes. Nothing's guaranteed, but I felt the need. I felt the need to take the Wildcats, going out on a limb a little bit right now, and our guy Sunshine Design coming in. Our resident, right? As I have all these resident fans over here, is our resident Wildcat fan here in this. Like what the job David Braun has done. Okay. I said it in one of my videos this week. They need to have a contract ready to put on his desk. They need a contract for David Braun yesterday. Because there are other schools around college football that are looking around at David Braun and they're saying, he'd be great. He'd be great. He'd be great. He'd be great for our school. Okay, that's where we stand right now with David Braun. So Northwestern, you stumbled upon a gold mine. Okay, there were obviously not good things that happened during the offseason. And now you stumbled upon this. You stumble upon a gold mine with David Braun coming straight from the great city of Fargo, North Dakota, from his time as a DC at NDSU. And now the thing about coaching is making connections with players. And David Braun is making connections with these guys in a short period of time, which tells me if you hire him to be the permanent head coach of the football team, you're going to have you're going to continue to build upon those relationships as well. So we've got that. So I've got Northwestern beating Iowa this week, and I can kind of roll through some of my other picks here for the game this week. I gotta find my picks from where I posted them, so I'm gonna go find them right now. Let's just run through them a little bit. Michigan, everybody's talking about them, right? For good and for bad, maybe. Michigan 52, Purdue 10 this weekend. Michigan currently riding a 32.5 point spread over the Boilermakers and a 49 points on the over-under. So over and a cover right now for them I've got at Michigan. Iowa, Northwestern 17, Iowa 13. I already mentioned that as well this week. Minnesota taking on Illinois. The Gophers, a 2-point favorite, hosting the Illinois Fighting Illini. with the over-under at 42.5. So let's talk about the Gophers and let's talk about the Illini. I got a 20-14 Gopher win. Okay? Historically, Brett Bielema has had the Gophers number. It's been all about that. Right? He's the Gopher killer during his days at Wisconsin and so far during his days at Illinois. That's what he's been. But this is a little bit of a different Illinois team right now. Like I said, it's a roller coaster. They beat Maryland. And when I'm looking at that game in a vacuum right now, I say, well, that's a pretty good win considering where they're at. Look what's happened to Maryland. Losing to Ohio State. They lose to Illinois. They finish 0-2 against the state of Illinois by losing to Northwestern as well. I don't know right now how impressive that Maryland win is. I think we're going to find out more if Maryland can bounce. I know Maryland, talent-wise, I believe is a pretty solid, a pretty good football team, but we'll see. But I got the Gophers winning 20-14. I know they've been a little bit banged up, but every injury they have, it seems like there's another running back that steps up. Look at the performance that Jordan Newbin had last week. Fantastic performance for Newbin. So I got the Gophers 20-14 over there. That game is in Minneapolis here this weekend. Speaking of Maryland, I've got Penn State. We got Penn State number 9. I had them at number 9 in this poll, but I put this out before the CFP rankings. They're at number 11 in the college football playoff rankings. Penn State is a 10-point favorite at Maryland. And they got 50 for the game total over there. I got this one going slightly under. Penn State 30, Maryland 17 in this one. Penn State has not impressed me as of late. They looked pretty good during the season. It just I don't know what's happened with Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. They appear to maybe have lost a step a little. I don't know what's happening there. They're just. I know there's been a lot of talk about explosive plays for the Penn State Nittany Lions, but it's not there. It's not there right now for Penn State. It's just not there. I don't know. And the receiver, right? The receiver room, that was a big question mark coming into the season for the Nittany Lions. What are they going to do at a receiver after some of their losses, Mitchell Tinsley and Parker Washington from last season? I want to see Penn State come out and dominate Maryland. I just don't think it's going to happen. This game is in College Park. I think Maryland having now 3 consecutive losses, and after losing to Northwestern, they might be a little bit angry. They might be a little bit mad. They might have something to prove kind of coming out in this game. Penn State has dominated Maryland as of late in this series. I just don't see an utter domination in this game for a couple of reasons that I mentioned there between Penn State and Maryland. Let's talk Nebraska and Michigan State. We've got Nebraska, let's see, a 3-point favorite going on the road to East Lansing to take on the Spartans of Michigan State, 34.5 on the over-under. Some people think, like Vegas thinks this game is going to be pretty close, right? 3-point spread in favor of the Cornhuskers. But I got this one 27-7 Nebraska. Michigan State has just been reeling this season. And I know there's been some things, some bright spots that have maybe popped up here and there. But, man, when I look at this game, it's just Nebraska, even with their injuries right now, it's next man up. They're hitting. Their defense is a really good defense right now. And they bottle up that run game. And I could see, I don't know if Michigan State can throw this football. I don't know if they can do it. I think that's a big question for me. I think this is more about the Nebraska run game, or sorry, it's more about the Nebraska defense, I should say, than anything. So that's kind of where I'm at with this Huskers and Spartans game. All right, let's go through a couple of different. We got 2 more games in the noon slot. Wisconsin, Indiana, folks. If you want an upset, keep an eye on this one. Sleepy Bloomington, Indiana. Sleepy Bloomington, Indiana. I'm from Wisconsin. I'm a Badger guy. And this one scares me. It scares me, right? Indiana at times, let's see, this is a team that hasn't given up yet. They could have easily given up on cringy Tom Allen so far this season, but it hasn't happened. Wisconsin, sitting at, when I hit this line, it was 9.5. Wisconsin, a 9.5 point favorite going on the road to Indiana. 45 is your over-under right now. I picked Wisconsin 23, Indiana 16. So I've got an Indiana cover. I think an Indiana cover is a fairly safe bet right now, sitting right there at that 9.5. But Badgers, if they don't have Braylon Allen this week, it sounded like he practiced a little bit but didn't go very hard on practice on Sunday. But if they don't have Braylon Allen, this is all in the hands of Braden Locke, and you got your wish, Phil Longo, because now the dairy raid has come to Madison, because now you got to throw the ball. With all due respect to Jackson Aker and Cade Yakimelli, for the Badgers, you got to find a way to throw this football around. I don't think this receiving core has stepped up in the way that I expected them to step up this season. I thought they'd be a little bit better so far this season, but it hasn't happened. It hasn't happened. I think the Badgers have more talent, but it would not surprise me to see Indiana come out on top against Wisconsin. That would not surprise me. That's the game I got on upset alert, the Badgers and the Hoosiers. Last one we're going to talk about, Ohio State and Rutgers. Ohio State, number one in the country in the CFP, sitting there at 18.5 point favorites, taking on the Rutgers Scarlet Knights, 42.5 for my over and under. So at 18.5, I got Ohio State covering. I got a 31-10 Ohio State win. And this Rutgers defense has been very good, and in some of these games this season, Ohio State, against some of the good defenses, maybe hasn't come out and played their absolute best on offense. Kyle McCord, there was a video of him kind of limping off in an ice bag around his foot. What's the status of Kyle going into this? If he is able to go, how mobile is he on that foot? This is a game at Rutgers. Think what Rutgers has to do to try to keep this game close early on. You got to try to find a play like you did against Michigan, right? Remember that slant route to Christian Dremel, 60-some yards to the house? You got to try to find a way to get that spark right away, whether it's going down the field, the run game with Kyle Monangai, the quarterback run game with Gavin Wimsatt. Whatever you have to do to find that, try to find that in this game at home against the Ohio State Buckeyes. Too much talent, though, for Ohio State. Too much talent. You got Marvin Harrison Jr. right now, who's been really putting it up and been doing a fantastic job over there. Definitely the best receiver in the country. It's probably him and Roma Dunze over at Washington, but he's been doing a phenomenal job. I got to feature this comment from our guy. Well, we got two Buckeye fans in the chat right here, so I'll go to one and then I'll go to the other. McCord's not very good. There's been times where, like, look at that final drive of that Notre Dame game, where Kyle hits big throw and big throw and big throw, and he makes clutch plays. You just don't see the overall consistency that you did at like a Fields or a Stroud or somebody like that. You see throws that are off, but I think Kyle makes enough of the throws, and you got enough talent with 18 with Marvin over there that I think they're going to be fine. I think Ohio State's going to be fine. Will they be fine when we get to, what is that, November 25th, when we play the game against the Michigan Wolverines? That's what I want to know. That's the big question for me. But this is not an Ohio State team that is your father's Buckeyes. It's not your one-year-old's Buckeyes. Right? Even going back to last season. When we think Ohio State, we think of the big play, 60-yard touchdowns, 70-yard touchdowns, big, explosive offenses. This is an offense, now that Travion Henderson is healthy once again, you need to pound the rock. You need to be a Big Ten offense. And I know, Ryan Day, I know you want to throw the football. I know you do. And Kyle McCord is a lot better than people give him credit for. But Kyle McCord, I think they got to lean on that run game to open some things up in the pass game down the field. That's the way I really feel about this Ohio State offense. If they can continue, if Travion Henderson, some people at the beginning of the season, they were talking about Travion, they were talking about Mayan, people were up in the air who the number one back is. I don't think there's any question that it was Travion Henderson. And he's proving that. He is a really good running back. He is one of the Big Ten's best running backs. You need to continue to ride him because I think that's going to make things easier for Kyle McCord. You're going to bring extra defenders up into the box, and when you do that, see you later. Because Marvin's going to take it to the house. He's going to go up there and make a play. Billy coming in. Kyle is playing. He's playing. How effective is he going to be when playing? I think that's a big-time question I have right now for Kyle McCord, right? Like I could throw back to Cade McNamara. I know these are two very different things. Two very different things right now. But when I look at this, Cade, I think it kind of hurt Iowa's offense, where he wasn't able to be as mobile. If Rutgers is able to get pressure and Kyle is forced outside of the pocket, is he going to be able to buy himself that extra second, 2 seconds, or whatever it is, to be able to go and make a throw? And Billy Tuesday also chimed in. Second half stats this year are better. That's the thing about Ohio State. They've already gotten by Penn State. Okay, they're fine there. It's all going to come down. Is Ohio State going to be playing their best football when they play the Michigan Wolverines here late this season? What is Kyle McCord going to look like when they're playing the Michigan Wolverines this season? Because you've combined Kyle's inaccuracy at times, and then these offensive tackles that are replacing NFL guys. That's been a combination that has been. Ohio State's been a great team. They're the number one team in the country right now, and well-deserved. They've got the best resume in the country, having beaten Notre Dame and Penn State. But there are some things. There's a few things that they really need to figure it out. And maybe they can scheme their way around it by getting Travion Henderson, this run game going just a little bit more. A lot of depth in that running back room. A lot of depth, though, in that running back room. Michael Assman chiming in. Ohio States have been spoiled, very spoiled, from exceptional quarterback play for several years. McCord is not a Heisman. It could be a lot worse. When I power rank Big Ten quarterbacks, and I think Saturday Tradition on Twitter did this, and kind of surprised me the results. I got to get a on this thing. I got to get a screen capture so I can kind of show you these things. So maybe I'll do that by the time I do my next live stream here. But anyway, Kyle McCord, like your best quarterback in the Big Ten is J.J. McCarthy. And then I think McCord and Aller are right there. I mean, I don't know. I think that's a 2A and a 2B situation. And then you drop down, and after Taulia, I think they put Heinrich Haarberg, believe it or not, as the number 5 quarterback in the Big Ten. I know there's been some injuries. I know there's been some things. Maybe some guys haven't played as well as we've expected them to. But hey, this is kind of where we stand right now. So great stuff. Great stuff. Great live show tonight, talking about the Big Ten schedules for 2024, and then kind of progressing into this talk for 2023. Got to keep an eye out what happens with Michigan here coming up. I know there's been a lot of urgency with some of these athletic directors and coaches and everybody as of late. It seems that maybe something is going to happen with Michigan, so you gotta keep an eye out certainly for that as this thing kind of progresses down the road as well. That's definitely something that is going to be talked about a lot. It's been talked about on this channel. I try maybe not to talk about it as much, especially during the season, but there's no question about it that is the big story that everybody seems to be talking about right now that's going on with the Michigan Wolverines over there as well. So I'm excited for these new schedules. I'm excited for 2024. I'm excited for some of these big matchups. It's going to be a really fun ride as we continue to kind of finish things up here so far this season. I want to thank everybody for chiming in here on the live stream here tonight. That'll do it for tonight, but I'm going to try to not make this such a rare occasion, right? There was a solid, it's like 3 weeks to a month there where I didn't do a live stream. I try to do one in theory. I try to do one every week. So So hopefully I'll be doing more of these here in the future. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in here to the live show tonight. 2024 is going to be here sooner than you think. And those games are going to be really, really fun. It's going to be a good week of Big Ten football. Here's what I got coming up. And I don't know if I mentioned, I don't think I mentioned this at the top of the show. But now that everybody's here, I can mention it. We'll be going live on this channel, right? We didn't do one for 4 weeks. And now we're doing it again, right? Because we're going to be going live 10 a.m. tomorrow on Friday, because I do a weekly radio segment with the ESPN radio affiliate in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Every week, I got a buddy that works up there, Spencer, and we do a Big Ten segment every week previewing the games, kind of talking. So I'm going to be live at 10 a.m. We're going to record our segment at 10:30. So I don't know why I didn't think of this before, but I'm going to bring it to this audience. They've been airing it on their station and everything over there, but we're going to bring that event. So I'm going to come on about at 10, we can kind of chat for a little bit, and then we'll record the segment at 10:30, which I'll air live here on this channel. It's kind of a preview of the Big Ten, kind of going back and forth. So I'm going to try to air that as we continue to kind of go down the pike here. So that'll be tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. 10:15 a.m., something like that. So we tape our segment at 10:30. So that's what we got going on. That is tomorrow. And then a good slate of games this weekend. I'll probably have reactions to Iowa, Northwestern, maybe Penn State, Maryland, and then Michigan, Purdue in the nightcap as well. So until next time, I'm Big Ten Ted. We will see you in the next one.